Good morning. I'm Fred Kalmbach, Managing Editor at The Advocate, and welcome to our 2022 Economic Outlook Summit. We've got 6 panelists here with us today to discuss what lies ahead for the Baton Rouge area economy. First, let me introduce Andrea Gallo. Andrea is a reporter for The Advocate who's going to help us lead the discussion today. We'll start with a presentation that puts numbers to the social and economic forces driving our community. And then we're going to move into our panel discussion with experts in real estate, energy, banking, logistics, redevelopment, and healthcare. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsors who made this event possible: Entergy, Our Lady of the Lake, and East Baton Rouge Parish Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome. And before we move on, we have a message from the mayor and from our other sponsors.
Hello, my fellow citizens and business leaders throughout the Baton Rouge region. As we move forward into 2022, I'm so optimistic about the future of our area. Like communities around the world, we have had to navigate the economic impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Despite these challenges, our businesses are recovering. Companies are investing in our community. Unemployment is steadily decreasing, and the job demand in Baton Rouge is greater than ever. Our local economy is not only recovering, it's thriving, and of course, for continued growth. Unemployment is down, and residents are securing quality jobs in fields like nursing, technology, and logistics. These are characteristics of a strong, diverse, and growing economy. The status of our community has helped us land major investments from companies like Amazon, ExxonMobil, and Rural Sourcing. Additionally, colleges and universities across the country are seeing lower rates of enrollment, yet ours remains strong with over 54,000 students enrolled at our institutions. These students are injecting dollars into our economy and creating opportunities for retaining talent in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is seeing more job opportunities, high levels of investment, increasing workforce development, and improvements to our quality of life through initiatives like the MOVE VBR Transportation Program, the East Baton Rouge Parish Stormwater Master Plan, the redevelopment of our historic neighborhoods. We are setting the stage for a prosperous future for everyone. The state of our Baton Rouge economy is strong, and I wish to welcome everyone to the Advocates 2022 Economic Outlook Summit.
For nearly 100 years,
Entergy has powered our stories.
Stories of hope,
triumph,
resilience.
1.3 million customers.
More than 5,000 Louisiana employees.
Each one a story.
From rebuilding marshlands
to opening new doors for students.
Entergy ensures that all of our stories shine brighter.
Because together,
we power life.
It's a network
that works for me and me
and me.
It's all connected.
A connects to B. B connects to me.
Oncology, neurology, orthopedics, ENT to general pediatrics. Our Lady of the Lake Children's Health is Louisiana's largest and most comprehensive pediatric network, committed to serving all of your child's healthcare needs.
It's like a huge net that keeps us healthy.
Our Lady of the Lake Children's Health, the best in pediatrics.
It's that simple.
So now we're going to hear from Adam Knapp, President and CEO of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, which leads economic development for the non-parish capital region. Welcome, Adam. Adam's going to give us a snapshot of economic activity, and there's going to be a lot of good information in the slides you're about to see. He's done this every year for us. It's a wonderful bit of information to get. Then we'll move on to our panel discussion. So Adam, if you could share your screen with us, which you already have, I'd say we'll get started.
That's great, Fred. Thank you for having me, and it's great to see everybody. It's going to be a great experience to go through this, and a lot of great panelists that are going to share some information. What we want to do is just share some of the economic data for what's happening in the Baton Rouge area over the next 10 or so minutes. And everything that is in front of you, the slides are available on our website at brac.org/research. This is partially from a presentation we did in late December, about a month ago. I encourage folks to go and read the full report if they want to know more, and share it with their colleagues and business partners, something we try to do every December to help with business decision making. So with that, let me dive in and tell you how we're entering the year. You heard from the mayor's brief introduction a moment ago, some of the great economic development wins that happened this year. In fact, we had a record amount of committed capital investment projects from projects that announced publicly their intentions last year, whether those were expansion projects of existing manufacturers, new manufacturing projects coming in, or services companies, technology companies, logistics companies, a wide variety of industries diversifying the economy, close to 2,000 new permanent jobs across those 17 project wins. We actually are really excited heading into this year. Something we haven't shared yet is we have about 55 active economic development projects considering a location in the capital region as we enter into 2022 across all 9 parishes of the capital region. And at least 10 of those alone are in the renewable or transitional energy sector. So we're seeing a huge amount of new investment in those categories as we head into the year. Of course, that portends investment and new construction jobs, industrial construction jobs on the horizon over the next 2 to 3 years, which should lead to, we think, full job recovery in the capital region by 2023. We're today, as of the most recent data that came out over the holidays, at just shy of 400,000 non-farm jobs in the Baton Rouge area economy today. Of course, you can see we lost close to 30,000 jobs during the course of 2020 in the pandemic, but have recovered nicely. We actually had 1 month in the fall last year where we saw 10,000 jobs added in one single month. So it has not been slow, and that's creating a lot of pressures in the economy. What's really compelling about where we are today is we have 44,000 posted positions where companies are looking for workers in the Baton Rouge area. So if all of those were actually filled, we'd be way, way, way higher than we were even at the beginning of the pandemic, which points to the possibility of full recovery. Of course, when you think about where we are in terms of unemployment rates, we're actually already at full recovery. We're below, as of 2 months ago, where we were in February of 2020 in terms of our unemployment rate. The numbers that came out over the holidays, this has actually been updated. We're at 3.5% unemployment rate. What this slide shows you, we aggregate the unemployment rates of our peer regions, places like Birmingham, Columbia, South Carolina, Mobile, Alabama, or Little Rock. Those are all referenced on the bottom of the slide. That green line shows how the unemployment rates on average across these peer metropolitan mid-sized cities, how they're doing. And we're a little bit above them, but still a very healthy economy for where we are. Across the labor market, you'll hear from employers that labor is a major issue. What the Federal Reserve has said is they think we're actually potentially at full employment in the United States, which would suggest that perhaps the current conditions are here for a long time. So all of our focus as a community really is going to be focused on helping employers find new and creative ways to try to access talent. And so that's really going to be a theme across a number of these slides, as you'll see, which is going to be the next slide. You heard in the mayor's comments also that college enrollment in the Baton Rouge area has been surging. We actually are now at 55,000 enrolled students across higher education. LSU has seen substantial growth. This remains a college town. The reason we include this data is over the last year, we've actually seen all of our higher education institutions align that they want to make it very easy for small and mid-sized businesses to access the students for internships or careers through a software platform called Handshake, which is free to employers. And we encourage folks that aren't yet on it to post open positions on Handshake as a way to try to find interns or future permanent hires, not just from our four-year colleges like Southern or LSU, but including our community colleges. And why is that important? Well, we have seen in the census data that came out last year, Baton Rouge has now 850,000 people in the overall metropolitan area. We've had 2 consistent years of net in-migration of residents overall. However, the bad news is we have seen an out-migration of the age group 25 to 44-year-olds. As the slide here shows, pre-pandemic, 6 of the last 7 years were a net out-migration of young professionals, which points to the urgency of making sure we're doing a better job at retention and attraction of this kind of young professional segment of our economy. It also is something we've also been focused on as an organization and as a community is how does it look that all folks have access to the economy? Something I think Will Campbell from B1 Bank is going to be able to share some strategies around in a moment. But in this, you'll see Baton Rouge is doing better than our peer regions that I talked about earlier, and better than Louisiana and the U.S. overall at both management in occupations by gender or by race, but nowhere near where we should expect to be as a community, something that shows a significant gap. When you hear more and more employers, especially over the last 2 years, thinking about diversity and inclusion programs within their businesses to look at how they think about management promotion, that slide, especially on the right, the gap between white and black households that are accessing management positions, it shows just how far we need to go to really try to show some improvement in terms of diversity and inclusion in the workplace across the board. Now, we did some surveying in mid-October of area employers to ask them what they expect to see in 2022. What's really shocking about this is we have now doubled the expectations from the survey from 2020 to 2021 for what the expectations are for revenue and employment. As you can see, 62%, almost 63% saying they expect to see more revenue this year than they had last year. And for many, last year was a record level of total revenue for their businesses, and yet they expect to see continued growth overall. That is a little bit less than half saying they expect to see employment increases, but still a really healthy picture for where we expect to see the year. This is a slide kind of portending optimism from employers. What are their concerns? We asked them to lay out the obstacles that they think are going to hinder their ability to compete in the Baton Rouge area. Pre-pandemic, for like 7 years, it was traffic. That it was the number one obstacle to doing business. Well, as of the pandemic, workforce, no surprise, is the number one issue. Over the last year, the gap has widened between workforce and other issues. The other thing that jumped out to us is material costs. What we see as kind of those effects of inflation and the supply chain challenges are directly affecting employers. That has risen from the 8th concern to the 3rd highest concern, interestingly above crime as a concern for obstacle to doing business in the capital region. The last slide we wanted to share on kind of data slides is the vaccine rate in the capital region. And one of the things that we've been kind of talking about is what's the effect of that across employment and occupations and business activity. Well, you can see the Baton Rouge area is overall about 50% of residents in the 9-parish region have had both their vaccine doses. There is not available data to be able to add booster data into this. And then interestingly, East Baton Rouge is now over 50% fully vaccinated for the first time since we've been tracking this in our monthly indicators. Still nowhere near where the community would want to be. I'm sure for leaders in public health, this is still not where we want to get to and is really the primary interest. The other reason for including this slide for those larger employers watching today, as of Monday, the new federal vaccine mandate kicks in. Now, many of you have already started preparing for that and been reaching out to us, asking questions. By the end of this week, we're going to put out a little, what we call our COVID brief that's available for folks to get answers to questions about what this means for them. But starting Monday, the expectation is that employers begin to communicate their plans for assisting their employees to get vaccinations or setting in place a weekly testing program. And that they have about a month to put in place their program to make sure that's enacted. That's all under the guidance from OSHA, which is where we direct you to find more information about that. The final slide, and all of these are available, like I said, on our website at brac.org/research, and I'm sure the advocates are going to make them available. These are the key takeaways from what we see in the data. This is an economy that is, traditionally you'd think of economic development concerns as how do we make sure we have more jobs to drive growth? That is not the situation we have today, although we want to continue to pursue strong economic development to help diversify the economy. We're in a position where everybody is focused on workforce and labor. It's a great position to be in entering 2022. It's also a guiding light, we think, for employers to think new and creative approaches to how to do that, not just their traditional ways of posting positions, perhaps through the advocate, but also thinking about going to communicate with, say, public reentry program, prison reentry programs, using software like Handshake. And later this month, BRAC is going to be releasing a new tool to help employers with labor market challenges and recruitment. So some suggestions for us about how to approach that. Of course, our higher education partners from LSU, Southern, and especially our community colleges are great allies in this work, and we encourage you to reach out to all of them as well. With that, Fred, thank you for having me. We look forward to questions.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Now it's time for Andrea to introduce our panelists, who should all start popping up on your screens in a moment. Andrea?
Thank you, Fred and Adam, and thank you so much to all of our panelists who are about to join us. I'm going to introduce them right now. First off, we have Leila Mae Wilkes, who is the CEO of Brown Eagle. We have Will Campbell Jr., who is the director of the B1 Bank Foundation. We have Dr. Catherine O'Neill, who is the chief medical officer at Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center. We have Jonathan Walker, who is a senior commercial sales and leasing executive at Maestri Mural. And finally, we have Greg Upton, who is an associate research professor at the LSU Center for Energy Studies. Thank all of you so much for being here with us today. And we're gonna go ahead and hop into questions. We'll start off with Leila Mae Wilkes. So as CEO of a logistics company, we want to know, what do you see as the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity for your industry in the coming year? Oh, and Ms. Wilkes, I think you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The biggest opportunities that I see is if the chemical plants open back up, they have these millions of dollars of projects on their books, and if they can open back up and implement these expansions, it's going to be a huge boom for Louisiana and for the Baton Rouge area. The challenges that I see is infrastructure. We desperately need a loop, and we need to plan for the future, not for what's broken right now. I see us trying to fix things that are broken, but not in the manner that's going to take us into the future. This OSHA mandate is going to be huge. The cost to implement it, who's going to pay for the testing, COVID, is there another variant out there? The young people that I hire don't have adequate child care. And then their cost increases. Wages are going up. Benefits are going up. Across the board increases in commercial insurance, and on and on. So all of those are going to be challenges for this coming year.
Thank you so much for that insight. Next, we're going to go to Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell, we're wondering, as the director of the B1 Foundation, you definitely help entrepreneurs get started, especially young ones. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest obstacles that you're seeing in that realm as we head into 2022?
Yeah, just as Adam alluded to, was workforce development is and having a workforce is a major challenge for small businesses now. And also supply chain, get a shortage of products. I know there was an article in the Baton Rouge Business Report about a young lady that owns a chicken place, and she was having, challenges getting, the product that she needs to service there. And the other piece is access to capital. From a financial standpoint, a lot of small business are being challenged, not having the correct financials in place. And we as bankers are trying to be a advisor to these small businesses. And that's one of the things that we do here at the foundation at B1 is to educate them in those areas. But all I'm hearing is the buzzword about entrepreneurship. That is some of the biggest challenges. But if we can just continue to enlighten these small businesses, I think we're going to have a great year in 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Next, we're going to turn it over to Dr. O'Neill. Dr. O'Neill, whenever COVID first surfaced in 2020, I don't think many of us predicted that 2 years later we would still be in this position. So what is your forecast or prediction for COVID in 2022? Oh, and you're on mute if you can unmute
Sorry,
yourself.
I thought I unmuted. Thank you so much. If you had asked me in 2020 and in 2021 what my forecast would be for the year, I would have been wrong each time. So we probably don't want to hear a forecast for this year. But this is a pattern, and we all looked at patterns. Adam just showed us several patterns that we're going to rely on. And if you look at the pattern over the last 2 years, we're going to have several more surges. The height of those surges and the impact of the community are what we can start to work on. But this virus won't go away. And hopefully through more and more buildup of immunity, we'll see that they impact our community less. But we can't at all start to message that this will be our year, right? This will be a year in which we should prepare to handle these things better than we have in the last 2 years. And from a business perspective, what we just heard Adam talk about, what we heard Ms. Wilkes talk about is really workplace absenteeism. So if I'm going to anticipate future surges, how do I cut down on workplace absenteeism? Because we need every worker who is available to be at work every day, because we're not going to find just this cache of workplace involvement in the next year. And that goes back to the things that we were talking about. First, vaccination, but then after that, how can you plan your workplace better? And I think that all of us, as we plan for the future and don't just solve this problem for today, need to be looking at our workspaces. Do we have adequate ventilation? Can we eat outside? How do you take an employee who may be symptomatic, move them through, and then protect the rest of your workers? Because workplace absenteeism is probably the number one challenge for the next year.
Great. Thank you, Dr. O'Neill. Next, we're going to go to Greg Upton at LSU. Mr. Upton, we're wondering if you can tell us what the outlook looks like for the petrochemical industry and refining oil and gas sectors in Baton Rouge and the state over the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think of the oil and gas industry, we really look at two separate buckets. The first is that upstream oil and gas extraction and services. And I think that's what most people think about when they think about oil and gas. And that's, searching for hydrocarbons, drilling, producing. But that's actually not the industry that we have an exposure to here in the Baton Rouge region. It's really that energy manufacturing that Lee LeMay works in, where we take those hydrocarbons and we convert those into products that you and I use every day, whether it be liquid fuels such as gasoline, plastics, chemicals, et cetera. And, what's really been interesting over this past decade watching this industry is that it's way less what happens domestically that impacts that industry is what's happening internationally. We've had this enormous increase in hydrocarbon production here in the United States. And really the demand growth for those energy products is coming from the developing world, such as Asia in particular. And so Baton Rouge is really well situated because we have access to those feedstocks, but also we have access to that robust port system in that Gulf of Mexico in order to export those products worldwide. And so right now we're really seeing positive things. We're seeing prices in Asia and Europe are really high relative to the United States. We're continuing to see records in exports. We've actually surpassed the pre-pandemic peak. And so with all that together, we have seen a reduction in employment in those sectors, obviously, as we have in a lot of sectors. But we're anticipating that probably mid-2023, that sector will be back to pre-pandemic levels, and then hopefully growth after that.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Jonathan Walker. Mr. Walker, can you tell us how the commercial real estate market is shaping up for 2022?
Sure. Thanks, Andrea. If we want to look at 22, we kind of have to go back and see what happened through 2019 to 21, and I can briefly go over that. 19 was a great year for the commercial real estate industry. 2020, we went through the same thing like everybody else did, starting in March, and worked with local lenders and landlords and tenants just to try to figure out what the future looked like. As COVID surged and then it went down, and as it's coming back, the future is I'll take Dr. O'Neill's quote, it's hard to predict. What we are seeing is we're seeing people not as scared of COVID, but they're just planning to move forward living with COVID and living around COVID. So really what we've seen in the retail industry is just, shorter term leases. It's hard for people to predict what their business looks like in this environment. And when it's hard for people to predict what their business looks like 3, 5, 10 years from now, then they're not going to sign long-term leases. So we've seen a lot of movement towards short-term leases, but also the types of leases we are signing. More focus on wellness, more focus on urgent cares, more service type industries. We're not signing that many leases with, women's clothing stores or any kind of goods anymore. It's more kind of that service industry. The office market has kind of been a low point for us. It started off with, well, do people need more office space because we need to spread everybody out? Or do we need less office space because half the people are working from home? The office leases we're signing are still the short-term leases, like I talked about with the retail industry. It's tough for a business to forecast 3 to 5 years out in this industry. And so they're signing short-term leases, and the leases that they are signing are kind of more geared towards garden office style. We're not seeing a lot of people flock to large, Class A buildings, whether it's downtown or along Essen, like we did pre-pandemic. So as the future, living with COVID, you're going to see more of the drive-through restaurants. You're going to see more short-term leases, and you're going to see more leases geared towards service and wellness in our industry.
Thank you so much. Finally, we'll circle back to Adam Knapp. Adam, we are wondering, with all eyes continuing to be on inflation, how local businesses are feeling the effects of that so far.
Yeah, it's a great question. You're already seeing in the data that it's rising as a concern for area businesses. In the last perhaps month or so, there's been some sense of a little bit of relief as some products have started to get better, through a little bit better. Some of the national port infrastructure seems to be sort of moving through a little better, as you're seeing 24-hour port operations kind of becoming the norm everywhere across the U.S. And that's slowly improving, but it still remains a substantial challenge. We were with a number of employers over the last week even who said they feel like their costs for goods are going up between 25 and 30% year over year. And they're adjusting, and some of those can't be passed on to consumers, which is just squeezing them, right, or other customers. So that remains an issue. It's one that we think is here for at least another couple of years, and so we're watching to see how it's going to affect. What's interesting for us, though, is there is a sense that employers, as we saw in our project activity, are still moving forward with projects, given how much demand is out there, that they are still planning and executing projects. They're just trying to make sure that they can build in this cost uncertainty as part of their project evaluation. It is, we think, slowing down some project decisions, and Greg may be able to speak to this, but all these huge petrochemical projects, it factors substantially into their cost of their designs. And so we've had a lot of announced projects, but they also are trying to make sure they can kind of get a figure on what their right number is going to be for both labor and for cost of materials, both of which continue to be unpredictable. So it's going to drag out or lead to cost overruns on a lot of these big projects that have been announced.
Adam, can you follow up a little bit as far as the consumer level goes on that as well? You spoke about businesses passing some of these costs on to consumers. What are consumers feeling right now?
It's probably a better question for others. We don't really track substantially that. We have been partnering with a group called ACRA, which tracks consumer prices, and we submit data, which is funny to find out that we have to go out and go to the grocery store and submit prices for milk and butter and wine to folks to make sure we're helping to assist in the kind of the tracking of national inflation, which is a great job. If you want it as an intern, come and call us. But the data is still showing what you're seeing nationally is it's rising faster than people are predicting, and it's changing almost monthly. And at the pocketbook, that's affecting just about everybody. I think what you're going to continue to see is you heard from Jonathan, is more low cost options as a higher priority, and those that are able to serve the needs of consumers that are looking for price comparison shopping. Those are going to be a business asset or a class, I think, that's going to continue to rise.
Well, I guess it's my turn now. Lila May, speaking of inflation, I know in your business you do a lot of labor supplying workers to businesses. How is inflation affecting that aspect of your business, and how's it affecting the chemical plants, which Adam mentioned?
Right now, we can still get applicants. The labor market is very tight for our skill set, but we are still having people come in and apply. We're still able to hire. I think, but what we're seeing is if they can, as they come to work, if they hear about another job that's paying a little bit more, they will leave and go to that other job. So it increases your turnover, which increases the cost of training and doing business. I think in the future, once Amazon comes on, it's really going to put a lot more pressure. It will put a lot more pressure on the whole labor market. And we're going to have to meet what they're paying. We're going to have to meet what their benefits are. So all of that is going to add to the cost of doing business. And as someone said, sometimes you can pass it on to the customer and sometimes you can't. And the other thing, in the chemical industry, our people have to have TWIC cards, which subjects them to very stringent conditions about working in the chemical plant. So this also leads to a tightening of the labor market for us.
Well, thank you. Will, I was wondering, looking ahead in 2022, what are kind of the areas of caution and for optimism for banks and other lenders? I don't know how much inflation plays a role in that, but it seems like it would.
Yeah, I tell you one area of caution is, the hospitality industry, because the pandemic really affected a lot of hotels, event centers, and all those individuals there. Also, startup businesses. We got a lot of startups been taking place over the last year, so we've definitely been cautious there. And one big thing for me as a lender is watching these companies not grow too quickly, and managing their cash flow. That's one of a banker's nightmare, is to give a company too much money to do a lot of damage to themselves. So we really as bankers are really monitoring that. So I think those areas are of caution that we're focusing on.
Are you seeing more demand for that kind of startup capital?
Yeah, actually, we have been getting an influx of opportunities for startups. For instance, yesterday I had a guy, engineer. They starting a company and need $300,000, and finding ways to do that. I think individuals during the pandemic found out that they can work from home. And a lot of women, from what I'm understanding, is trying to start their companies too. And so it's a challenge for a startup to get the access to capital that they need from a lending perspective.
Is there any rush on trying to get money given inflation fears? Have you seen that at all yet?
No, I haven't. And I just want to understand your question. A rush to get capital to start?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of companies that, like I said, they are needing that capital, to get those businesses off the ground. And it's very hard for a banker, if they have less than 2 years experience or 3 years, it's hard for us to get those qualified and show that they have a repayment source to do those loans.
Gotcha. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Dr. O'Neill, how has COVID permanently changed the way hospitals operate? That's a pretty broad question.
It is. I think it's permanently changed all of us. We are a nonprofit business like everybody else, and we have the same issues. We have supply chain issues. We have workplace absentee issues. We have also the issue that people are just sicker. Our entire community was not the healthiest coming into this pandemic. And we knew that, and we stared at those charts for way longer than we should have without substantial action in how to make our workforce healthier. But really and truly, we suffered from that. And so again, Leila May pointed it out, but how do we really think forward? We have to have a healthier workforce for the next 25, 30 years. And from the healthcare standpoint, we also have to pivot away from the hospital and back to our clinics and say, how can we put up more wellness? But wellness isn't just about exercising. Wellness is about making sure that every 20 to 25-year-old has a hypertension screen, because there's a significant part of our population who is going to go on to develop end-stage renal disease and be a dialysis patient and be taken out of the workforce early because we don't tell them that they have high blood pressure between the ages of 20 and 25 when they have no concept of going to the doctor. Just like they have no concept of going to the dentist, and somewhere around 30, everybody realizes I should have been doing that. That's a really important part of prevention. And so from the healthcare perspective, hospitals are adjusting to a much higher cost of care and much longer lengths of stays because we've made our community sicker, and we'll feel the impact of that for years. From the prevention side, we've got to invest in prevention for the community. And we need to start talking with our business leaders about if you want a healthier workforce for the next 20 to 30 years, how do we bring your younger workforce into healthcare earlier so that we can start those prevention efforts now?
Thank you. Greg, there's been a lot of, it seems like, movement in wind energy elsewhere, and not nearly as much in the Gulf. And why is that? And what are the prospects for development in the Gulf?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's this thing called physics that doesn't help us that much. So just because of how the Earth spins, the closer you get to the poles, the faster wind speeds you have. And so this is just a reality. And so where you've seen a lot of the wind development has been further north in the globe. And so as these technologies get better, which we have seen them get better, they'll be able to be more efficient at lower wind speeds. And I think that'll be the time where you see that development in a place like the Gulf of Mexico. There is a lot of discussion right now, and there's specific projects in the planning. I've been told by people that it'll probably be 2023, 2024 before any real project could actually get traction moving forward. So I think it's definitely something that could be part of our decarbonization strategy as a community. And earlier I mentioned really the global nature of our petrochemical sector. And with the Paris Accord in 2016, we're seeing all of these companies that are making these ESG or environmental social governance goals that include decarbonization commitments. And this includes major oil and gas companies that have large presences in Louisiana. In order to be globally competitive, we're going to need to really look at reducing our carbon footprint. And so while wind is definitely a piece of that, perhaps off in the future, I think ones that could come more immediately are, number one, transition to biofuels, which with the Grown Fuels project is one example in Baton Rouge. It's very exciting. Another example that we're seeing is carbon capture and sequestration, where you can take the carbon that comes out of these industrial processes and store it underground. And so decarbonization is certainly going to be important for our competitiveness, but I think wind is probably a few years off for us here in the Gulf Coast.
Gotcha. Jonathan, got a question for you. We've heard Amazon mentioned a couple of times so far, and it does seem to be, one of the biggest economic development projects that hit our city in quite some time. How is that affecting commercial real estate in that area around the old Cortana Mall?
I've had this conversation with tons of people asking how this would affect not only Baton Rouge proper, but North Baton Rouge especially. And it's our opinion that the highest and best use for the Mall of Cortana was not a mall anymore. And I think everybody realized that. There's no reason for us to have some of those big box stores in that area when you can just go down the road and hit the same big box store. So when Amazon came along and took down that site, that was best case scenario for us, not only to fill a void where there was a lot of retail, but to create jobs. And when jobs are created, then you get everything that kind of flows from that. You get traffic generation, You get other businesses that pop up next door to it, whether they service Amazon or they feed off of Amazon or just benefit from the traffic that goes along Florida Boulevard. You know, industrial nationally has been really the commercial real estate's darling. It kind of checks two boxes. It checks the box that we humans need and want our stuff faster and faster. You know, we want to be able to click and have that thing at our doorstep in 24 hours. And then it also checks the box of COVID. You know, there's no human interaction when you're able to order something online. It goes to a warehouse and then it shows up on your doorstep. So for those two reasons, not only is the industrial market good here in Baton Rouge, but it's good throughout the country as well.
Adam, tossing this question to you. Leila May had mentioned earlier that we really need to work on our infrastructure, and she talked about, you know, a loop, and another thing that comes along with that is a bridge. There's a lot of money just been thrown at infrastructure from the federal government. What are our chances?
So they're very good, probably better than they've ever been. 2021 had a couple of significant things that happened that make getting a new bridge, a southern loop, as we might call it, made a reality. So a few things that are happening. By this summer, the environmental process to select a location or multiple choices of locations for a bridge will be completed. We'll get down from what is like 17 possible bridge locations down to what they think is going to be 3 possible bridge locations where there's environmental feasibility. The Corps of Engineers have kind of helped kind of narrow that list. The river pilots have kind of looked at the maps. That helps to narrow the possibilities of options. What happens immediately after that is they go into a deeper phase of environmental review, which is really more of a buildable project that somebody that's going to be buying the bonds from a toll project would be willing to back once they see that deeper level of certainty on the projects. With the dollars that have been approved by our state legislature this past legislative session, they put an additional $300 million annually into transportation investments, a huge jump up from where we've been. That makes it much more likely that the state has the resources to bond out major infrastructure projects for the capital region, like a bridge or in Lake Charles. Like they need to have a replacement of their I-10 bridge as well, which is a little bit ahead of our project in terms of planning. The other big thing that happened last year is the match from the feds is much more likely. Now that you've seen this bipartisan infrastructure package passed, that creates resources not just for crumbling infrastructure that needs to be replaced across Louisiana in terms of bridges, but also the possibility that over the long run, there's really significant resources to be able to match state and private toll funded resources that's going to be necessary to put forward a bridge project. Our hope, to kind of sum up, Fred, is that new southern route, a bridge plus connectors back to I-10, should be possible to see going out for a design build project as soon potentially as like 2024, that you'd actually go out and the design and building of that bridge is very much a reality. It's no longer do we have the resources to do it. It's can we make sure there's the political will amassed to make sure it gets done in a reasonable period of time. You also heard the mayor talk about Move BR. There's some 20 odd projects that are under construction on arterial infrastructure in East Baton Rouge to try to improve the flow of traffic when the interstates, shut down and sort of structurally kind of impairs our whole community. We need flow to improve across the arterial network. That's coming as well in a substantial way next year. And then over the course of this year, we're going to begin to see utilities being moved to make way for the I-10 widening, which is really a critical project. It's probably the most important long-term project for easing the flow of what is our most congested network, that span from the bridge to the split. That goes under construction. We expect that to be a 6 to 10 year project to get that completed.
Well, thank you. I hope that would be interesting. I hope you're right. I've been hearing optimistic statements for a very long time, but you're right. It does seem things do seem to be lining up, I think, a little bit better now. Andrea, I'm going to turn it back over to you to ask some more questions.
Okay, great. And as we go around this time, if anybody wants to jump in and add on to what somebody else is saying or debate, dispute, whatever it might be, feel free to do that. We'll stay on the traffic issue that we just talked about with Adam. Leila May, you spoke earlier about the need for a loop. What would you say is the number one necessary fix as far as traffic goes in Baton Rouge that would help your company?
Well, the fixing the bridge, because truckers don't want to come to Baton Rouge. If they can get a load and go somewhere else, they'll get a load and go somewhere else. They don't want to come here. I have employees who live in Port Allen who won't take jobs in Baton Rouge. I have employees in Baton Rouge that won't take a job in Port Allen because they're not going to cross that bridge. There's to get to the plants on the east side. There's 2 lanes. If you have a breakdown, if you have a wreck on those 2 lanes, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, an entire shift of employees are going to be late. They're not going to be able to get there in time. There is no transportation to those plants. We're talking about building a railroad track to New Orleans. We ought to be sending a bus route to the chemical plants. We ought to be planning ways to reduce traffic. And I don't see why we can't take that beautiful bridge that they have up at St. Francisville, turn Highway 10, okay, from the Interstate 49 to Interstate 55, or from state line to state line into a loop. And I can only imagine what Florida Boulevard and Choctaw are going to be like when they're 200 to 400 trucks going to Cortana Mall. I haven't seen any infrastructure, and it may be out there, but I don't see any talk about widening Florida Boulevard or widening Airline Highway. Now in the afternoons, Airline Highway is pretty much a parking lot. And if you put trucks on there without a dedicated lane for them, a dedicated turning lane for them, I don't see how people will get down Airline. And I'm at Choctaw and Airline. I don't see how the trucks that come to my location are going to get here, because there is, like I say, maybe Adam, you can tell us if there's infrastructure changes in place, but I hadn't heard about them. So, there's no reason that I-12 from Baton Rouge to Slidell is not 8 lanes. We need to think about the future, not just what's going to get us out of right now. And I'll get off my soapbox.
Adam, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, it's a good comment in there. Our plans on both Airline Highway and Florida Boulevard and Move BR for those projects, they were named in the project list for widening or improvement. So it'd be a great project to have some of our DOTD or state folks to show us what that's going to do to the current flow volume, which I don't think we've seen that produced. There is also, just like the bridge project in Baton Rouge is a major priority, the widening, as Leela May pointed out, of I-12 all the way to the Mississippi line is also one of the other big priority projects that's in the queue for the state kind of capacity projects that they're looking at. So they are not necessarily anywhere in design yet on that piece that I'm aware of, but something we can dig in on.
Interesting. We've heard a lot of you talk today about labor shortage issues and this kind of so-called great resignation that's happening. Dr. O'Neill, I'm curious, in the hospital and in your industry, do you think that some of these labor shortages are driven by the extreme burnout of dealing with COVID patients, or is it maybe a combination of everything that people in these other industries are experiencing as well?
I think that it's a combination. I think we heard our former NIH head talk the other day about how little we have invested in those social sciences as we have learned more about scientific advancement, but not understood the human nature that wraps itself around scientific advancement. So I think when you look at how anything impacts the economy, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a force of nature, how do people come out of that? Whether it's the fires in California or our hurricanes, we are all grappling with multiple things that have impacted our population that have been devastating, have been mentally challenging, and have uprooted their families. So how do we expect them to settle back in and come to work productive and in the right mental state to not sit there at their computer at least part of the day and say, where else could I live? Because everybody's looking for workplace development right now, right? And so how are we going to tackle that? I think that it's all of our problems. Definitely the hospital is thinking about that. And I think that Adam spoke to that, reaching that very young age early, bringing them into your workforce, developing a team-based mentality. You are more likely to go back to the first company who trained you if it was a good experience. And so how do we all embrace that younger culture, which is really hard to do, and we don't have a lot of science around that, but making sure that they feel like they're part of the team, it makes them more likely, even if they leave, to come back and turn around during their productive years and land back in our spot. I think that's what we need to focus on.
Will, on that note, finding qualified employees has definitely been a challenge for businesses over the past couple of years. How are the small businesses that you're helping dealing with those sorts of issues?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the one we're talking to is as you know, we are losing a lot of talent, in the upper scale businesses in the Baton Rouge market. But as a small business owner, it's just been very challenging, especially in the retail industries. A lot of turnover has taken place with a lot of businesses that we've been talking about. And one thing that I'm concerned about in the service industry, where you was making, like minimum wage, and then with all the competition coming in, how are you gonna, keep your profits in line at the same time, get enough individuals to handle the volume in your business. So it's been very challenging to a lot of small businesses that we've been dealing with in those particular areas. One, because of qualified individuals and wanting to come to work and being consistent coming to work. I think Dr. O'Neill kind of mentioned this. This younger generation that we have, the mentality is different. They don't have, I guess, the commitment, of baby boomers, and so it's been very challenging for these small businesses.
Andrea, I'll jump in if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the real estate world, you've got, the same thing that everybody else is seeing. You've got labor shortage, you've got the cost of that labor, and then you've got the rising cost of everything that involves an expense in commercial real estate. I mean, think of property insurance right now, especially post hurricanes. If you've tried to get insurance on, renew your insurance on your house, even on your car or a piece of commercial property, it's all gone up, and I'm talking about 15 to 30%. And in our world, we have two different types of leases. We have gross leases where the landlord basically pays all those expenses, but now everybody's focused on what we call triple net leases, which is where they pass on maintenance, property taxes, property insurance on to the tenant. And guess who the tenant passes that along to? The end consumer. So it's a cycle that we're seeing pretty much in every industry, especially in commercial real estate, where any increase in cost gets passed all the way down to the end consumer and affects them. What we're most concerned about, at least in investing in Louisiana, is just what one of Adam's slides showed us, and what everybody has pretty much alluded to here. You've got a traffic infrastructure problem here. We've got a crime rate that's very high compared to other parts of the country. And we've got, our public school system isn't that great. And until you solve those three main things, you're not going to compete with neighboring states like a Texas, when you're competing for the same types of industries and you're competing to keep those same young people here in Baton Rouge or anywhere really in Louisiana.
Well, I'd like to say I agree with that. And I think we should make it easier to do business in Louisiana than it is in Texas, not harder. And we've seen, with the way we have changed ITAP, we have just made it an extremely difficult place to do business. Our goal should be, this is the easiest state you can set up a business in the United States, not the hardest one.
Greg, you've spoken a lot about renewables today. Is there a reason to think that that is a way that we can keep young people and future talent in Louisiana?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got, so right now, we actually have a lot of expansion in solar energy that's really exciting. Just in the MISO footprint, we've got over 6,000 megawatts of solar projects that are in the planning phase. And so, of course, there's going to be a lot of jobs, construction jobs with that, planning jobs with that. The sort of double-edged sword to solar projects in particular is that once they're built, the marginal cost of electricity is extremely low, which is good for ratepayers and consumers. But there actually aren't a lot of jobs that are needed to maintain those facilities. And so, in my mind, what is the more important thing for us as a community is really to think about the carbon intensity of the products that we produce. If we're able to produce products at the lowest carbon intensity, talking about liquid fuels, chemicals, plastics, and provide those to the entire world, that is what it's going to be, that demand, that international demand that provides that growth for us here in the Baton Rouge region. And so, yeah, while it's definitely exciting to see these projects and see the jobs that are attached to them, I think the more important piece is kind of that longer term, how we get that carbon footprint down and how we make that a competitive advantage for our region.
And Andrea, I would just add to what Greg said, that from the petrochemical sector, you're hearing that be the most important commentary they're asking about. How can we lower our carbon footprint? The pressure from Wall Street on petrochemical companies to do that. You saw Air Products come out this past year with a $4.5 billion new project in Ascension Parish to make something called blue hydrogen. Well, they will sequester all of their or nearly all of their carbon in the sort of deep, very deep subsurface, to make sure that they're protecting the environment. In doing so, they're sort of pointing to the future of where hydrogen and raw material inputs are going. But you're hearing the same from all of the majors, that they're putting pressure on all their suppliers, including utilities, that they want more and more and more of their supply of power or goods to be greener and have a lower carbon intensity. And that's where what Greg has referred to multiple times is this decarbonization of the industrial corridor is definitely coming, and it's being led by industry, which is really a shift in the last few years, and something we think is going to be a big story for next year or for this year and the coming years.
I have one question, I guess, for Dr. Neal. I think there's been discussion of the coming mandate for vaccines with businesses. I know, with the hospital, you kind of went through this earlier. What lessons do you have for companies that might be facing this, in the coming month?
One of the things that we had to do is talk about the why. And there are multiple reasons why vaccination is important. It's very important on a personal level, and you'll reach some people through that. Hopefully, in the last 2 years, we've reached those people who are interested in their own personal health. It's very important to talk about how this impacts the whole team. We had multiple units who had outbreaks and had to go out together, which kept everybody else stressed because we were unvaccinated. And once our vaccination rate actually increased above 70%, we stopped seeing that happen. And so it all goes back to, can you keep your workforce healthy? And when we talk about being healthy, I want the person who helps my workload to be at work. And if we all get vaccinated together, we're more likely to be able to do that. So I think there's multiple reasons that people feel compelled to vaccinate. And you have to talk to each one of those and be very upfront about, yes, it's safer for our business, it's safer for our healthcare workers, and it's safer for you. Which one of those things do you choose? But all of them have to be touched upon because everybody feels it differently. From how do you prepare for testing? You're going to have to work with either some testing company, but I don't know what the longevity of those companies will be. That's up in the air. Or with your healthcare providers, and who are you reaching out to in the healthcare sector to have that easily accessible? Is that on site? Maybe more expensive, but much more convenient. Or is that off site, which may promote vaccination more? And so all of those things are big questions, and we are here to help answer some of those questions and to help meet the need. But the biggest bang for your buck is going to be education towards the vaccine, obviously.
Well, I think we're about out of time. I do hope that when the Advocate holds its next business outlook, COVID will be far less of a factor in these discussions. But, there have been a lot of optimistic notes compared to what we were hearing last year at about this time, which is, it's good to see. I want to thank you all for agreeing to take part on our panel today, and thanks to all you tuned in to our summit here. And I want to say thanks again to our sponsors, Entergy, Our Lady of the Lake, and Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome. Everybody have a good day and take care, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.